All right, here we are. Are entitlements and other government efforts to lift up black Americans actually doing more harm than good? Our next guest says absolutely. Here to explain is Fox News contributor Jason Riley, who wrote a book about it. It's called Please Stop Helping Us, How Liberals Make It Harder for Blacks to Succeed. What do you mean stop helping us, Jason?
I think that what blacks need to develop as a group are certain habits, certain traits, certain sensibilities and attitudes. And to the extent that a government program, however well-intentioned, undermines that self-development, it does more harm than good.
What proof do you have?
Well, you can look at the unemployment rate among blacks, which has been double that of whites for more than 50 years.
In fact, we have it right now. Let's take a look at it together. Right now, as of May, it's 11.5% for black Americans, as opposed to the national average is 6.3%.
One of the methods by the government used to try and close that gap has been the minimum wage law. But minimum wage laws disproportionately harm blacks by pricing them out of the labor market.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that to the extent that you make it more expensive to hire people, fewer people get hired. And the minimum wage laws are sold as an anti-poverty measure, but most poor people already make more than the minimum wage, and most people who make the minimum wage aren't poor. People who are poor because they don't have a job, not because that the job they currently have pays too little.
But in society, people will say, hey, you know what, we need affirmative action because too many white people weren't hiring black people. We had to put things like that in there.
Well, the black unemployment rate and labor participation rate used to be much closer to whites before we started implementing things like minimum wage laws. So it's just not true. At a time when there was much more rampant racism in the world, the 30s, the 40s, and 50s, black unemployment and white unemployment was quite similar. Today, as you see, it's more than double among blacks.
All right, so let's take a look at this. It's not unusual for an employer to say, I need a background check, criminal background check, so let's look into that. How does that, how is that not balance the playing field?
Well, when you limit the amount of information an employer can have about a prospective hire, the employer is then forced to act based on generalities, paint with a very broad brush. If they know that most blacks in their neighborhood are committing most of the crimes and they can't check out a black applicant, they're more likely not to hire any blacks at all. If you let them do the background check and find out if this particular black fits that profile, then they're more likely to hire the black.
All right, now let's talk about the way we're at in society. A lot of people watching right now and saying, well, Jason's doing well. And he just says, you know, he doesn't understand what other African Americans are going to on a white basis. Have you come against racism in your life?
Oh, sure. I think it'd be hard-pressed to find, you know, a black person who hasn't, or a woman who hasn't experienced sexism, or a Jewish person who hasn't experienced anti-Semitism. There are plenty of biases. The question is whether these biases prevent socioeconomic advancement in America. And it's just not true that they do. And I think the left uses racism as an all-purpose excuse for bad black behavior, in essence. And what I think blacks need to do is focus on themselves. Only blacks can help blacks succeed. That's the point of the book. And to the extent, again, that the government interferes with the black self-development that needs to take place, that other groups have had to do in order for them to rise from poverty to prosperity. To the extent that that gets interfered with, it does more harm than good.
And you also talk in your book about soft-on-crime laws, how that has a boomerang effect.
Yes, absolutely. Black-on-black crime is most crime. And so to the extent that we have tough-on-crime laws, you are helping blacks. Back in the 90s, we had 2,000 murders a year. 70 or 80% of them were black. A couple of years ago, that went down to 400, or the high 300s. Those are tens of thousands of black lives that were saved because of tough-on-crime policies. Now we have a mayor in New York who wants to roll back those policies. That's going to cost black lives.
It's a fascinating book and take. Jason Riley writes about it. It's called Please Stop Helping Us, How Liberals Make It Harder for Blacks to Succeed. Jason, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And I know you're going to have some fiery debates about your book, and I'm sure you welcome that. All right.